When a rogue wave twice the height of your mast appears on the horizon, you have less than 60 seconds before your ship either rides it or gets obliterated. Pirates who survived these liquid mountains used a counterintuitive technique that modern sailors still debate. And one wrong move meant 200 men vanished without a trace. Picture a floating wooden fortress designed to take a beating from Mother Nature herself. That's exactly what pirate ships were. And boy, did they need to be tough. These weren't your weekend pleasure boats. They faced hurricanes that could snap masts like toothpicks and waves tall enough to swallow a 3-story building. Smart shipbuilders knew the secret started with choosing the right wood. Oak was the gold standard, dense, strong, and stubborn as a mule. Pine worked too, especially when oak got expensive or hard to find. But here's the thing most people don't realize. These weren't just any old trees. Shipwrights hunted for timber that had grown slowly in harsh conditions. Why? Well, trees that struggled produced tighter grain patterns, making them naturally tougher. The hull planks were absolutely massive, up to 4 inches thick in some spots. That's thicker than most modern furniture. These planks got fastened together with iron nails or wooden pegs called trunnels. Iron was stronger but expensive. So many pirates mixed both depending on what they could steal or afford. Then there's the brilliant engineering most folks never hear about. Those curved wooden supports called futtocks weren't just decorative. They formed the ship's rib cage. Along with L-shaped braces nicknamed knees, they created a framework that could flex with enormous waves instead of snapping like a brittle stick. But even the best-built hull meant nothing if water leaked in. Shipbuilders stuffed every gap between planks with oakum, basically old rope torn into fibers, then sealed everything with hot tar. The smell was awful, but it kept the ocean where it belonged, outside the ship. Here's where things get really interesting. Some ships were actually too tall and top-heavy for serious storm work. Captains would order them razed, basically chopping off entire upper decks with saws and axes. Sounds crazy, right? But removing all that weight up high made ships much less likely to tip over when hit by massive waves from the side. The whole process was like building a wooden submarine that could also sail fast and carry dozens of armed men. Every joint had to be perfect. Every plank needed to hold under pressure that would crush a house. And speaking of pressure, all this careful construction was just the foundation. Because once you had a ship that could survive being pounded by the sea, you still needed to catch the wind that could either save your life or destroy everything you'd built. While pirates spent months perfecting their hull construction, all that heavy oak meant absolutely nothing without proper sails. Think about it. You could build the strongest ship in the Caribbean, but if you couldn't harness the wind correctly, you'd end up drifting around like a very expensive piece of driftwood. Most pirate vessels relied on square sails for one simple reason: pure speed on open water. These massive canvas sheets could catch enormous amounts of wind, propelling ships forward at impressive rates. But here's where things get tricky. Square sails work brilliantly when the wind cooperates, yet become death traps during sudden storms. The real heroes were the sailors who had to climb up there and wrestle with these canvas monsters. They'd scramble up rope ladders called shrouds and ratlines, sometimes 60 feet above a pitching deck. Ever tried climbing a rope ladder while someone shakes it violently? Now imagine doing that in a thunderstorm with winds trying to peel you off like a barnacle. When storms approached, experienced crews knew exactly what to do: reef the sails immediately. This meant pulling in sections of canvas to reduce the wind's grip on the ship. Too much sail area during a gale could snap the mast like a toothpick or flip the entire vessel sideways. Those heavy wooden beams holding the sails, called yards, presented their own challenges. Smart captains ordered them lowered during the worst weather because a broken yard falling from that height could easily kill several crew members. The sound of a massive yard crashing to the deck was apparently loud enough to hear over howling wind. Then there's the incredible complexity of all those ropes. Every single line had a specific purpose and name, and each one needed to be secured properly to sturdy posts called belaying pins. One loose rope during a storm could unravel an entire sail system faster than you could say, abandon ship. The most experienced sailors developed an almost supernatural ability to read wind patterns by watching how the canvas moved. They could predict sudden gusts, identify dangerous wind shifts, and adjust the rigging accordingly. These skills often meant the difference between riding out a storm successfully or becoming another ghost story told in taverns. But even the most skilled riggers faced moments when nature simply overpowered their preparations. When that happened, survival depended less on sailing expertise and more on how well the crew worked together as a unified team. Which brings us to perhaps the most crucial element of storm survival. When a storm hit, every pirate had exactly one chance to get their job right. No second tries when you're fighting 20-foot waves. The helmsman gripped that wheel like his life depended on it, because it did. Meanwhile, the bosun shouted orders that could barely be heard over howling wind. Makes sense, right? You can't run a coordinated crew if half of them are wondering what they're supposed to be doing while the ship's getting tossed around like a toy. Well, here's where it gets interesting. Pirates didn't just wing it during storms. They had a watch system that kept fresh sailors on deck at all times. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. The night watch knew every rope and sail by feel alone, because trying to see anything in a midnight squall was basically impossible. But the real magic happened with the new guys. Experienced pirates trained rookies using something called learning by rope. Sounds fancy, but it just meant grabbing a greenhorn by the shirt and dragging him to whatever needed fixing. Right now. No classroom lectures when water's pouring over the deck. The weird part is how they communicated during the chaos. Hand signals worked better than screaming most of the time. Point to a sail, make a cutting motion. Everyone knew that meant reef that canvas before it rips apart. Touch your belt and point down. Secure the loose gear below deck. Then there's the matter of staying attached to the ship itself. Smart pirates tied themselves to whatever solid piece of wood they could find during the worst weather. Sounds cowardly until you realize that getting swept overboard meant certain death. No Coast Guard rescue boats in 1700. Let's not forget the cargo detail. While some crew fought the sails, others scrambled below to check for leaks and shifting weight. Water sloshing around the hold could destabilize everything in minutes. These weren't desk jobs. Every single task required split-second timing and absolute trust in your shipmates. And the captain? He stayed topside through the entire ordeal, making calls about which direction to steer and when to drop emergency anchors. One wrong decision, and the whole crew could end up as fish food. The most experienced sailors took the hardest jobs during storms. They climbed the highest rigging, handled the most dangerous repairs, and made sure the rookies didn't accidentally kill themselves or anyone else. Because when morning came and the sea calmed down, someone still had to sail the ship. But even the best crew coordination meant nothing if the ship itself wasn't properly weighted and balanced from the start. Picture a pirate ship rolling violently in choppy seas, and you might wonder what keeps these wooden vessels from flipping over like toys in a bathtub. Well, the secret lies hidden deep in the belly of every ship, something called ballast. Pirates weren't just tough fighters, they were surprisingly smart about physics, even if they couldn't spell the word. They knew that loading heavy stuff at the bottom of their ship was the difference between sailing home rich or becoming fish food. Stones, iron bars, sandbags, and sometimes even broken cannonballs got stuffed into the lowest parts of the hull. Think of it like putting lead weights in the bottom of a fishing bobber. It keeps things upright when the water gets angry. But here's where it gets tricky. Too little ballast? Your ship tips over faster than a drunk sailor on shore leave. Too much ballast? You're sitting so low in the water that every wave crashes over your deck like an unwelcome guest at dinner. Smart captains constantly adjusted this balancing act. Before storms hit, they'd move ballast around like chess pieces. After capturing loot from merchant ships, they had to redistribute weight again. Those heavy treasure chests and extra cannons couldn't just sit anywhere. They got moved toward the ship's center, away from the sides where they'd cause dangerous rolling. Then there's the sneaky problem of top weight. Pirates loved their multiple decks loaded with cannons, but all that heavy metal sitting high up made ships roll like drunken elephants. That's why some vessels got razed, basically having their top floors chopped off. Sure, it looked less intimidating, but it beat drowning in a storm. Water barrels presented another headache. Full barrels were heavy and stable. Empty barrels, they bounced around like ping-pong balls in a hurricane. Experienced crews learned to either keep barrels completely full or tie them down tight when empty. Some captains even shifted water from one side of the ship to the other during heavy rolling, using liquid as movable ballast. The really clever pirates kept spare ballast stones ready to toss overboard if things got desperate. Better to sail light and survive than sink with perfect balance, right? Of course, all this careful weight management meant nothing if the crew didn't know what to do when storms actually hit. Emergency preparation required split-second timing and nerves of steel, something that separated the living pirates from the dead ones floating face down in the deep blue sea. When dark clouds started gathering on the horizon, smart pirate crews didn't just sit around playing cards and hoping for the best. They had about as much time as it takes to cook dinner before all hell broke loose, and every second counted. The moment someone spotted trouble brewing, the entire ship turned into a frantic anthill. Loose gear went flying into storage faster than a politician changes his promises. Ropes, tools, spare canvas, cooking pots, anything that wasn't nailed down got stuffed below deck or tied to something solid. Makes sense, right? Nobody wanted a flying cannonball or a loose barrel turning their shipmates into pancakes. Then there's the gunpowder situation. Pirates treated their black powder like their grandmother's china, with extreme care and a healthy dose of paranoia. The stuff got locked away in waterproof chests faster than you could say, boom. Wet gunpowder meant no cannons, and useless cannons meant becoming someone else's lunch money. Smart crews even wrapped the containers in extra canvas and sealed them with tar. But here's where things got really interesting. Every decent pirate ship kept what they called a storm anchor, basically their last-ditch effort to avoid becoming driftwood. This wasn't your regular anchor. Storm anchors were massive, heavy things designed to grab onto the sea floor and hold tight when everything else failed. The leak patrol started immediately too. Experienced sailors crawled into every corner of the ship, checking for weak spots that might give way under pressure. They'd stuff spare sailcloth into suspicious gaps and hammer wooden wedges anywhere that looked ready to split. Well, better safe than swimming with the sharks, as they used to say. Food and water barrels got the royal treatment during these emergency preparations. Nothing quite ruins your day like watching your dinner float away in a storm. Crew secured every barrel, chest, and sack with enough rope to rig a small ship. They even tied down the rum. And that's when you knew they were really serious. And the weird part is, the best crews could do all this preparation in less than 30 minutes. They'd practiced these emergency drills so many times that each man knew exactly where to go and what to grab. No confusion, no panic, just smooth teamwork that could mean the difference between riding out the storm and becoming fish food. Of course, all this preparation meant absolutely nothing if the captain couldn't figure out which way the storm was moving and how to position the ship to survive it. Picture a pirate captain squinting at the horizon through salt spray, trying to read nature's warning signs before they turn deadly. These seafaring rogues didn't have weather apps or satellite imagery. They had to become amateur meteorologists or end up as fish food. The compass was their best friend, but even that little needle could act drunk during storms. Magnetic interference from lightning made it spin like a tavern patron after too much rum. Smart captains kept multiple compasses and compared readings constantly. Well, the smart ones who lived to tell tales anyway. But here's where pirates got clever. They watched birds like hawk-eyed detectives. Seabirds flying inland meant rough weather approaching from the ocean. Gulls hugging the coastline, storms coming from the opposite direction. These feathered forecasters rarely lied, unlike some crew members who claimed they could smell storms coming. Cloud reading became an art form. Those towering anvil-shaped thunderheads meant serious trouble brewing. Pirates learned that weird greenish skies usually brought hail and violent winds. The really experienced captains could spot the difference between harmless morning mist and the ominous wall clouds that meant batten down everything or die. Then there's the lead line trick. This weighted rope helped measure water depth, but pirates used it for storm navigation too. Dropping it repeatedly told them if they were drifting toward dangerous shallows during wild weather. Nobody wanted to survive a hurricane just to get shredded on hidden reefs. Ocean swells told stories too. Long, regular waves usually meant distant storms, while choppy, confused seas suggested multiple weather systems colliding nearby. Pirates who ignored these liquid road signs often found themselves sailing straight into nature's buzzsaw. When storms became unavoidable, the counterintuitive move was pointing the bow almost directly into the biggest waves. Sounds insane, right? But taking waves on the side could roll a ship completely over. Head-on impacts were brutal but survivable. The windward side of islands became precious real estate during storms. Pirates would race for these sheltered spots, sometimes fighting other ships for the safest anchorages. These natural harbors could mean the difference between riding out the storm and becoming wreckage on some beach. Moonless nights made everything worse. Without celestial navigation, pirates sailed blind through towering waves. Some captains ordered lanterns lit despite the risk of being spotted by enemies. Better to fight rival pirates than lose everything to the sea's fury. Navigation during storms wasn't just about surviving the weather itself, though. The real challenge came afterward, when exhausted crews had to figure out exactly where the storm had blown them. Picture a pirate ship in calm waters, everything looking organized and peaceful. Now imagine that same ship when 20-foot waves start crashing over the deck. Suddenly, every single barrel, cannon, rope, and cooking pot becomes a deadly projectile flying around like angry hornets. Smart pirates knew this simple truth. Anything not tied down would become a weapon against them. And trust me, getting smacked in the head by a rolling cannonball wasn't exactly covered by their health insurance plan. Let's start with the heavy stuff. Those massive iron cannons weighing over 2,000 pounds each, they got locked down with thick rope tackles and wooden wedges jammed tight against their wheels. One loose cannon could punch holes straight through the ship's side faster than you could say, abandoned ship. Pirates called runaway cannons loose cannons for good reason. The phrase stuck around for a reason. But cannons weren't the only troublemakers. Every water barrel, rum cask, and food container needed securing with rope nets stretched across the cargo hold. Pirates used a crisscross pattern of thick hemp rope, creating what looked like giant spider webs holding everything in place. Some crews even built wooden frames around their most precious cargo. Then there's the gunpowder situation. Getting your gunpowder wet was like showing up to a sword fight with a butter knife. Completely useless. Special waterproof chests lined with tar kept the powder bone dry. These chests got triple wrapped with oiled canvas and stored in the driest part of the ship, usually near the center where waves caused less motion. Personal belongings? Everything got lashed down tight. Hammocks were tied to multiple anchor points so sleeping pirates wouldn't go sliding across the deck like human bowling balls. Sea chests containing clothes, tools, and treasures were roped to support beams. Even cooking pots and eating bowls were secured with leather straps. The really clever pirates went one step further. They'd string cargo nets along the walls and stuff loose items into canvas bags before storms hit. Some captains ordered crew members to wear safety lines around their waists, connecting them to the ship's rigging. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Securing everything wasn't just about preventing damage. It was about staying alive. A flying barrel could knock a man overboard faster than lightning. A sliding cannon could crush bones like twigs. Well, all this preparation was great when pirates had time to get ready, but what happened when Mother Nature decided to throw her worst tantrum without any warning? That's where centuries of sailor wisdom and some pretty interesting superstitions came into play. When death seemed certain and the storm refused to quit, pirates turned to some pretty wild beliefs. Many crews were convinced that angry sea spirits or cursed treasure brought the worst weather. Captains would order complete silence during lightning strikes, thinking loud voices might provoke whatever gods controlled the waves. Ridiculous? Maybe. But when you're watching 30-foot walls of water crash over your deck, you'll try anything. The weird part is how these superstitions actually helped. Staying quiet forced everyone to focus and listen for crucial sounds. Creaking timber, shifting cargo, or shouted warnings. Sometimes the dumbest rules accidentally save lives. But here's where things got really desperate. When hope started slipping away like water through the deck, captains made the hardest choice of all. Heavy cannons went overboard first, then barrels of rum, and you know pirates hated wasting good liquor. Finally, anything else that wasn't nailed down got tossed into the hungry sea. Well, except for one thing they never sacrificed, their most skilled helmsman. During the absolute worst storms, the captain handed the wheel to whoever had the steadiest hands and sharpest instincts. This wasn't about rank or friendship. Your life depended on someone who could feel the ship's rhythm through their boots and predict which way the next monster wave would try to flip you. These guys stayed at the wheel for hours, sometimes tied in place, steering by pure instinct when visibility dropped to zero. The really experienced helmsmen had tricks that sound crazy but worked. They'd steer into waves at just the right angle, letting the ship ride up and over instead of getting smashed sideways. Timing had to be perfect. Too early and you'd get crushed. Too late and you'd capsize. Then came the waiting game nobody talks about. Days spent in soaked clothes that never dried. Everything tasted like salt water. Sleep came in 10-minute chunks between emergencies. Skin turned wrinkled and raw from constant moisture. Even the toughest pirates looked like drowned rats after a 3-day blow. Yet the survival stories that made it into tavern tales weren't about the fancy navigation tools or clever ship designs. They were about crews who stuck together when everything went sideways. Pirates who shared their last dry biscuit and took extra watches so exhausted shipmates could rest. Makes sense, right? All the strong timber and clever rigging in the world meant nothing if your crew fell apart when the sea showed its teeth. The real secret wasn't just building ships tough enough for storms, it was building crews tough enough to match them.